I was lying in bed staring at the stark white ceiling. Heart surgery. It was a much gentler thing than what I'd let my wife endure. I'd put Eleanor, the woman slowly drifting into the shadows of dementia, into the hands of my daughter-in-law, Sarah, a successful accountant, someone I trusted completely. I thought 3 weeks of recovery would save my life. Little did I know that absence almost took Eleanor's. If you believe in family too, if you believe in karma, go ahead and hit subscribe and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. Because this story, it will make you doubt even the ones you hold dearest. I clearly remember that morning. The September sunlight poured through the kitchen window. It was golden, but it felt cold. It only highlighted the floating dust particles and the impending sense of loneliness. I was setting my small suitcase by the door, just enough luggage for 3 weeks of recovery after heart surgery. Eleanor was sitting at the dining table, her cup of tea long cold. Her gray hair was carefully brushed, but her eyes, that's where the real battle was happening. Those eyes, once so vibrant now, blinked slowly as if struggling to hold on to fragmented memories. She gripped my hand. Her touch was weak, but her gaze was heartbreakingly sharp. "David," she whispered, her voice husky. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to rehab, my love," I replied, my smile strained. "Just 3 weeks. Sarah and Ethan will be here. You won't be alone." She tilted her head, the familiar gesture of someone trying to piece together an unsolvable puzzle. "Sarah," she repeated, testing an unfamiliar name. "Sarah is good." Yes, Sarah was good. Sarah was our daughter-in-law, a successful certified public accountant, a CPA. She was cool and efficient. She had actually arranged this entire rehab trip for me. She said, "Dad needs to get strong. Mom needs the best care. I'll take care of her for you." It sounded so logical, so reasonable. It managed to hide every doubt. I kissed Eleanor on the forehead. Her skin felt colder than usual. "I'll call you every night. Remember, I always call you." Sarah walked into the kitchen. She was wearing a silk, navy blouse, elegant, not a wrinkle on it. She didn't look at Eleanor. She looked straight at me. "Time to go, Dad. The car is waiting. I've prepared all your medications and a list of what to avoid." The way she said the word Dad was sharp like a surgeon's knife. It wasn't daughterly affection. It was an efficient commitment. I shrugged it off, telling myself, at least the girl is responsible. Ethan, my son. Sarah's husband appeared in the doorway. He wasn't in a suit like his wife, just a faded polo shirt. His eyes always avoided looking at me, avoided looking at his mother. Ethan was a failed man. A string of terrible business ventures had drained his savings, and Sarah's money too. I knew Sarah was fed up with him, and Ethan, he was just a shadow. A tool. "Mom," Ethan mumbled, placing a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "I'm leaving now. I'll pick Dad up in 3 weeks. Eleanor offered a faint smile, an empty one. "Son." I hugged Ethan tightly. "Take good care of your mother." "Yes, Dad," he replied. His voice carried something that wasn't a promise. It was fear. I pulled the door shut. The oak door closed with a heavy thud. I didn't know if that sound was a final farewell or the click of a lock sealing away Eleanor's freedom. During those 3 weeks, I was recovering, and Eleanor was being isolated. The video calls happened at the same time every night like a ritual, but Eleanor was always in the dark, lit only by a dim bedside lamp. Her voice was weak, her replies slow, often just lifeless nods. Sarah was always right there, explaining Mom's tired dad. "Her illness is getting worse. I have to give her sleeping pills earlier." I asked, "Why not turn on the light? I want to see her face clearly." Sarah answered instantly without hesitation, "Light stimulates her, Dad." "I'm following the doctor's new protocol." She used professional terms. Protocol-stimulated medication, as if they were an impenetrable steel shield. I'm an engineer, I'm used to logic, so I believed her. I believed in numbers and expertise, and I believed in my daughter-in-law. There was only one time during one call. Sarah turned away quickly to take an urgent phone call. Eleanor had a second of lucidity. Her eyes, desperate, pleaded with me. She struggled to lift her hand, pointing to her lips, the gesture for water. But before I could even ask, Sarah was back, quickly hanging up. "Sorry, Dad, bad signal." That small gesture, that desperate need for water, it planted a seed of doubt, but I dismissed it. I told myself Eleanor is declining. Sarah is sacrificing. I can't doubt her. While I was trying to repair a physical heart, an unseen crime was being planned under my roof. It was the perfect setup: 3 weeks of quiet, a weak husband confined to recovery, and a victim chemically confined, unable to call for help. Those 3 weeks for Sarah and Ethan were the golden time to finalize their inheritance agreement. The unease I felt during that final video call was not random. It was a husband's instinct misled by dry logic. Back home, Sarah began to execute her plan, cold and precise. She knew Eleanor would never sign any papers if she was fully lucid. Dementia might take away memory, but it doesn't take away the instinct for survival. Eleanor's eyes were still watchful, her hand still strong enough to hold a pen. The problem was breaking that will. I found out later Sarah didn't need a basement or chains. She used something far more terrifying: chemicals. Eleanor had a mild sedative prescription to help her sleep at night. Sarah, a CPA, wasn't a doctor, but she was smart and methodical. She began to increase the dosage just a little bit every day. Not enough to cause immediate shock or death, but enough to sink Eleanor's body into a state of disorientation and perpetual haze. "Just keep her still," I heard on a recovered audio clip later. It was Sarah's voice, calm, echoing in the kitchen where Eleanor was kept. "Don't let her mess up our plans, Ethan. Ethan, my son." He was just a lurking shadow. He saw his mother sleeping all day. He saw his wife mixing those white pills into the pureed food. He closed his eyes. His financial failure and his fear of losing his wife Sarah being his last source of money made him a willing accomplice. Ethan's silence. That was a crime worse than Sarah's actions. Eleanor began to live in a world of fog. Everything moved, slowly distorted. The atmosphere in the master bedroom became heavy, suffocating. Light never entered. Sarah always kept the curtains drawn. Not because light stimulates her, as she told me, but because she didn't want anyone to see Eleanor's puffy face, her dark ringed eyes. She wanted to hide the evidence of mental captivity. The isolation was complete. Sarah gave all the caretakers time off, saying Eleanor was stable and she wanted to care for her herself. The door to David and Eleanor's house closed, locking hope inside. The quiet in that house for Eleanor was now a sealed chamber. It was the 15th day since I left. That was the day Sarah needed the signature. She needed to sell our retirement portfolio, an asset worth nearly $500,000, to bail out Ethan's collapsing cryptocurrency business. A crazy gamble by my son, now a burden Eleanor had to carry. That scene, I watched it dozens of times on the recovered video, and every time my heart seized up. Sarah was in her business attire, hair pulled back. On the table was a stack of documents. She put the pen in Eleanor's hand. Eleanor sat there, her head slumped like a doll whose batteries had run out. "Sign it, Eleanor. Just sign right here." Sarah's voice was falsely gentle, but her eyes were hard, devoid of pity. Eleanor wept. Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks, but no sound escaped her lips. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, but her spirit was still there. It was the ultimate torture, trapped inside her own body, witnessing her assets and her life being stolen. Finally, Eleanor could only manage a trembling movement of her wrist, a shaky, illegible scribble on the papers. Absolutely not a signature. Sarah frowned, grabbed Eleanor's hand, and forced the pen to move. "Good," Sarah said. "It's done. It didn't stop at the money." Sarah needed to make sure Eleanor would never recover enough to testify. That same day, she drafted a fake healthcare POA. Under it, Sarah would decide all of Eleanor's medical matters, and she would move her to a private nursing facility far away. This was the final step, isolating Eleanor from David forever, or until she passed away from the medication. Meanwhile, at the rehab center, I was watching a dull show on TV when my phone rang. Not from Sarah, but from our bank in San Diego, asking about a large asset transfer. "Is the name Eleanor Miller correct, sir?" The banker's voice was cautious. That caution. It was the first beam of light through my fog. "Yes, that's my wife," I replied, my throat tightening. "What's wrong?" "The signature." "It looks a little different, sir. It looks like she had some difficulty signing." Eleanor's gesture, pointing to her lips, begging for water in the video call, suddenly became crystal clear. The weak voice, the dim light. I realized they weren't just selling my stocks, they were selling my wife's remaining time. I canceled my scheduled flight. I booked an emergency ticket for the soonest possible flight. 3 weeks of recovery was only 21 days, but I couldn't wait any longer. I had to go home. I had to break that perfect isolation. I flew home that night. The plane shook violently, but I felt nothing but the coldness of betrayal. I carried a recently patched heart, but I was ready to fight. I knew I couldn't afford to slip up for a second. The isolation was broken. The hunt for evidence began. The taxi dropped me off at the corner around midnight. I asked the driver to stop 2 blocks from the house. Not because I was afraid of being robbed, but because I was afraid of being discovered. The house was submerged in darkness. Quiet, but not the quiet of sleep. It was the quiet of a tomb. I opened the door with the spare key, silent as a ghost. My heart, newly patched, pounded relentlessly, threatening to tear out of my chest. Hot blood rushed in my ears. I didn't turn on the lights. Everything in the dark was familiar. Every step, every corner of the table. I slid into the master bedroom. Eleanor was there. She wasn't asleep. She was paralyzed. Her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I called her name, my voice hoarse. "Eleanor, I'm home." No reaction. I reached out and touched her cheek. Cold. A cold not of autumn, but of deep loneliness. I lifted her wrist. Her pulse was weak, terrifyingly slow. The faint scent of medicine hung in the air. I leaned close to her ear. "I know. I'll fix everything. I'll save you." I left the room, biting my lip to keep from crying. No time to waste on tears. I had to act. Sarah and Ethan were sleeping soundly upstairs. I had a few hours. The first target, the cloud security system. I had installed a small camera in the family room where Eleanor and I often read. It was connected to the cloud, a solution I chose because it stored data off-site. I trembled as I opened my laptop, accessing the account. All the videos from the past 3 weeks were there, except for one crucial time frame, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on the 15th day. That was when Sarah forced Eleanor to sign the papers. The file was deleted, no doubt about it. Sarah, with the meticulous mind of a CPA, had left a flaw in her steel wall. She thought deleting the file was enough. But she forgot I was an old engineer. I knew about algorithms, about caches, about how data never truly vanishes. I spent a precious hour accessing hidden folders, temporary backups, numbers, lines of code. Sweat dripped onto the keyboard. I wasn't David in recovery anymore. I was a desperate man, digging for truth from the digital ashes. And then it appeared. The video file compressed, partially corrupted, but still viewable. I opened it. The audio was distorted, but the image was painfully clear in every detail. I've already recounted this, but to witness Eleanor silently crying, to witness Sarah's strong hand pressing down on my wife's hand, forcing the signature, it was a completely different experience. My heart felt crushed. It wasn't just financial crime. It was pure cruelty. But I needed physical evidence. I needed the pills. I remembered seeing Sarah stash something in the laundry room. I crept downstairs, each wooden step creaking underfoot, every sound like a gunshot in the still night. Laundry room, neat, clean. I opened the old medicine cabinet. Nothing. I opened the linen cupboard. Nothing. I knelt down, tracing my fingers behind the washing machine. A faint clink. It was an empty tin box. Inside, there were 2 pill bottles. One labeled for Eleanor the correct dosage. The other, unlabeled, had a small piece of tape with the word "strong" written on it. It was full of white sedative pills. I photographed them with my phone, carefully placed them in a Ziploc bag, then hid them inside my jacket. Just then I heard Ethan cough upstairs. They were awake. I couldn't confront them now. I was weaker than them. I needed the law. I needed medical evidence. I looked at Eleanor one last time. She was still lying there, her eyes looking straight at me. I whispered, "I'm leaving, but I'll be back with help. Don't leave me." I escaped the house, walking quickly into the darkness. My back was soaked with cold sweat. I pulled out my phone, called the police, called the private detective I knew. My voice was strangely calm, like a machine reading aloud an indictment. The truth had been found. There was only one more thing to do before I handed this evidence over. I had to talk to my son. I called Ethan, setting up a meeting at a cafe 20 minutes away. I didn't give him a chance to refuse. My voice then, it wasn't a father's voice. It was the judge's voice. I drove to the Morning Grind Cafe. It was where we usually went on Sundays. The familiarity of the place made the betrayal even more sickening. Ethan was already there. He was sitting with his back to me, but I recognized my son's thin silhouette. He was drinking coffee, staring into space. When I pulled out the chair opposite him, Ethan flinched as if shocked by electricity. "Dad," his voice was shaky. "You're back early. Do you know why I'm here?" "Not for recovery anymore, Ethan," I asked, my voice so low I barely recognized it. No anger, just an infinite disappointment, colder than a snowstorm. Ethan shook his head, but the movement was too slow, too fake. He knew everything. I didn't need to say much. I just slid the laptop across the table, opening the video. The clip wasn't long, about 30 seconds, Sarah clutching Eleanor's hand, forcing her to sign. The dark room, my wife's lifeless eyes. When the screen went black, silence descended. Even the clinking of cups from the counter seemed to stop. Ethan started shaking. Tears streamed out, not tears of remorse, but tears of fear. I'm sorry, Dad," he gasped. "It was Sarah. She told me it was the only way to save the business. She promised to pay everything back when crypto went up. She said Mom wouldn't remember anything." He started to blame a cowardly instinct that couldn't be forgiven. "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah." I repeated the name as if chewing on a piece of metal. "Ethan, you are my son. You are Eleanor's son. You watched your mother be poisoned and robbed, just to save your and your wife's crypto business." I pulled out the Ziploc bag with the pills, placing it on the table. "Do you recognize this? Did you see this being mixed into your mother's food?" The dam broke. Ethan completely collapsed, burying his face in his hands, howling fragmented apologies. He confessed how Sarah had manipulated him, how she had threatened divorce and cutting off all financial support if he didn't comply. He was a victim of manipulation, but he chose to become an accomplice. I let Ethan torture himself for a few minutes. Then I spoke, my voice cold and final. "The police are waiting at the house. They will arrest Sarah in 15 minutes. You have two choices. 1, you continue to remain silent and be charged as an accomplice. Or 2, you cooperate. Help me save your mother and receive the mercy of the law." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes swollen. He didn't ask about a lawyer. He only asked Mom, "Is Mom okay?" In that moment I saw a faint glimmer of the son he used to be. She's alive, and she needs to be saved. You have to choose Ethan. Ethan finally nodded. It was a slow, heavy nod of a man who had just lost everything, his money, his wife, and almost his mother. He chose his mother. We drove back home. As the unmarked police car parked a block away, we walked in. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly reading a financial report. She didn't know she was reading her final report. The police entered. "Sarah Miller, you are under arrest for suspicion of elder abuse, unlawful confinement, and financial exploitation." Sarah stiffened, offering no resistance. She only turned to look at Ethan, her gaze not of regret but of contempt for his confession. As the officers led her away, Sarah walked past me. She whispered, "You will lose them both, Dad." The words didn't hurt me, because the greatest pain was what remained. I looked at Ethan. He was still standing there, his eyes red. He chose to cooperate. He would be shown leniency. But I couldn't forgive my son, not for the money, but because he didn't protect his mother. He chose silence for too long. "You are not my son anymore, Ethan," I said, not looking at him. "This is permanent." I turned my back and left, leaving Ethan alone in the kitchen. Justice had begun, but the price was an irreparable family fracture. After Sarah was taken away, after I left Ethan in the kitchen, I rushed straight to the hospital. Eleanor was brought to the emergency room. Everything happened in a blur. I only remember the piercing ambulance siren, the doctor's worried face, and the cold confirmation. The sedative dosage was 3 times the acceptable limit. It didn't kill her immediately, but it accelerated the cognitive decline. Like an hourglass shaken violently, the last grains of sand fell faster. Eleanor was detoxed. Her physical condition improved. She was no longer in a haze. But her lucidity was almost completely gone. The coldness I felt when I touched her cheek was no longer from the drugs. It was the coldness of the permanent void Sarah had created. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand. The white hospital light highlighted the wrinkles and the withering on her face. I saved her from death, but I couldn't save her from herself. I looked at Eleanor. She looked at me. Then she smiled, a bright, pure smile like sunshine. "Who are you?" she asked. "Are you a doctor, Dr. Miller?" My heart broke. That was the first time she forgot me after being saved. I leaned down and kissed her hand. "I'm David, my love. I'm your David." She nodded, accepting it. A moment later, she forgot again. But I remained patient. She taught me patience over the years of her dementia. Now I was teaching her back. The trial took place 6 months later. Everything was exhausting, drawn out. Ethan, my son, testified against his wife in exchange for probation and community service. He was a weak, fearful witness, but his testimony, along with the video and the pill bottles, was undeniable evidence. Sarah Miller, the cold and ambitious woman, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. She heard the verdict stoically without a single tear, only her gaze, sharp and full of hatred, fixed on me. The money, nearly $500,000, was gone. It was lost in the crypto market and legal fees. We sold the house, a house too large for the two of us, now cold and full of ghosts. We moved to a smaller apartment closer to the park, closer to the sun. I became Eleanor's primary caretaker. Every morning I made breakfast. I always opened the curtains. The morning light flooded the room, warm and genuine, no longer the light of deceit. One day, as I was tying her shoelaces, Eleanor suddenly grabbed my hand, her eyes looking at my wedding ring. "Whose is this?" she asked. "It's yours," I replied without hesitation, "and this is mine. We are married, Eleanor. We are," she repeated, then sighed. "You have to protect it. It's everything." She wasn't talking about the ring. She was talking about trust, about the sanctity of a promise. I saved Eleanor, but I lost my son. Ethan calls, sometimes sends cards. I don't answer. I can't. The justice of the law forgave him, forgave his weakness. But a father's justice did not. I think of Sarah's final whisper. "You will lose them both." Yes, I lost Ethan. I lost the image of a complete family. But I still have Eleanor. I still have the afternoons holding her hand, walking in the park. She doesn't know who I am, but she knows she is safe. That is my justice. Not revenge, but atonement and responsibility. It is the declaration that the love and trust of the elderly are inviolable. Anyone, whether daughter-in-law or biological child, who breaks it will pay the price. I look at Eleanor sleeping on the sofa. Her hair is silver under the nightlight. Our life was torn apart, the money is gone, but we are still here. We are still fighting. And that is what Sarah couldn't steal. I turn off the light. This day is over. And tomorrow the fight will continue. If this story, even for a moment, touched your heart, made you reflect on trust and the limits of forgiveness, please leave a subscription and share this story. Let's spread this reminder together. Kinship is priceless, but it is not unconditional. Thank you for taking the time to listen to an old man's recollections.